Today, we're going to be doing a gentle, caring introduction to computer security. This is kind of different than a lot of other like essential security classes where they're going to sit down and teach you all kinds of stupid things that you'll never need in your career. We're really going to try to focus on what are the things if you have to do computer security and you have to do it from a triage perspective and you have to secure an environment right freaking now. What do you actually have to do immediately? I want to give a big thanks to Andrew Morgan and the Cyber Call. If you're with us and you're at an MSP or an MSSP on Discord, which I have very helpfully over here to my left, Discord people, how many of you are here from you found out through the Cyber Call? You found out through Andrew Morgan. Type in MSP at this point in the Discords to let us know because we really appreciate all the MSP, MSSP folks that are joining us at this particular point. It's the part where I'm like, do I still have connectivity? You know what I should do? You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to do this. Quick to the command line. Do, 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 do. Okay. Okay. It does not let me send my terminal. Oh, that is so poopy. Let's just do this. There we go. We're just going to let that run. So if at any point you see me do this, I'm just checking to make sure I have connectivity and we're still working just fine on that. We got Team Simply Cyber, but no one from the MSP community. Oh, that's interesting. That's really interesting. But huge fan of everything that he's doing for the MSP, and Team Simply Cyber is great. Also, the cloud VMs are provided today by Bellini Capital. Arnie Bellini is a very good friend setting up a really cool conference in Tampa Bay called Cyber Bay. If you're in that area, you should check it out. But Arnie is spending a lot of time and effort trying to get as many people trained in computer security as possible. And one of the things that we're trying to do with computer security and training and all of that is really trying to AI proof as many people as we can in the area of computer security. And we'll talk more about artificial intelligence and how that all works. But we really want to get people that are beyond the level of simple button pushers that are waiting for a red light to pop up, red light, because that's what we do. We sing a lot. We've got Till Tuesday, we got Voices Carry, we'll sing poorly a number of times, and I'm very sorry about that. But with working with Arnie, I got completely lost in where the thread was. But if we're looking at a lot of people that are just looking for red lights to pop up and tell them, hey, you've been hacked or something weird is going on, we're not doing a very good job, right? And those are jobs that are primed to be replaced by AI. However, people that truly understand the concepts and the core fundamental components of what it takes to secure an environment tend to be people that have jobs that are a little bit more resilient in the age of AI. But that gets into what is this? Like what is this class? Like seriously, what are we doing? This class was meant to be a bootstrap class. Like we're meant to kind of get you set up with the core fundamental knowledge and concepts that you need to be effective in your job trying to secure your environment right now. We're going to be covering a number of things in computer security that actually stop Black Hills Information Security's network penetration testers. We're going to talk about a number of things that we love to see and also hate to see in a network penetration test. And we're going to be covering 11 topics. But these 11 topics are going to be the core of what actually freaking works. So if you're looking at a lot of like essential security classes and they're like, we're going to go into crypto models, doesn't matter. I'm sorry. Like there's nobody that's just getting started in computer security, right? And they're like, wait a minute. I believe that this is an AES chaining block mode cipher versus an electronic codebook mode cipher. No, that doesn't happen. That's like one of those pipe dreams whenever you're reading a CISSP book or taking a lot of like essential classes that are out there in computer security. And you're like, really? Am I going to be like really getting down into the weeds of what's the stream cipher and a block cipher? And what are the different modes of AES? No, you won't ever really. That does happen at higher levels of computer security. It does. Like if you're researching a product, but you're going to look like an a-hole if you're new to computer security and you're on a call with Salesforce and you're like, excuse me, what type of mode and AES and the block ciphers are you using in your product? That basically says, hey, I just took an introductory class and look at me. I'm really smart. It's like that kid. You've all ran into that kid. It's kind of like the opposite of the uncle at Thanksgiving. It's the freshman or sophomore year college student at Thanksgiving that comes and sits down at the table, and you're all like getting around Thanksgiving. Maybe you say grace and all that. And they're like, well, actually, during Thanksgiving, there was no turkey and it wasn't really set up this way. The pilgrims were actually starving and the native, and it's just like, God, oh wait, that was me. I'm that guy. That was me, right? You don't want to be that person in computer security, right? Like you just don't. Instead, we really want to focus on what are the things that will actually secure a network, not weird arcane trivia and man pages of a bunch of different tools, but really getting down into what freaking works. Now, these are the things we're going to be covering. And every one of these things, and I have a wonderful little list and I got to update it at some point. Every one of these things we've correlated back to penetration testing at BHIS. And every single vulnerability that we have discovered and we've exploited in over like 700 security assessments over the past year would have been stopped by a combination of these security techniques. This entire concept was developed by my brother and I. We were sitting at a conference, we had a napkin, and Brian's like, really, how complicated is security? He's like, do we have to know like all of this minutia and all these weird things? And I'm like, no, no, no. I think it could be boiled down to like, I think it started with 5 things, then it expanded. But when we started going through our tests, these were the things that would have stopped us. Cold. Application allow listing. Sounds hard. Totally not. Totally not as bad as you think it is. Password controls. Egress traffic analysis, user entity behavioral analytics, which has been completely replaced by AI SIM log analysis, advanced endpoint protection, logging, proper logging, not logging everything, but proper logging, host-based firewalls, internet allow listing, vulnerability management program that actually works, active directory hardening, and then the 11th we just threw in there for fun because of, ransomware, backup and recovery. So if you look at our pen tests, the first 10 things can stop every single one of the attacks that we throw at an organization. Now, what's not in here? I don't have policy. I don't have user awareness training. I'm not going to go through an inventory management of an environment. I'm not. Even though those are important things, they are not like the most essential things that would stop an attacker cold in their tracks. So in this course, we're going to be talking about the things that would stop an attacker cold in their tracks. That's what we want to focus on. So we're not going to be covering intro to Windows. I'm not going to be covering intro to Linux. I'm not going to be going over TCP/IP, crypto, CBK, different security models. Like, once again, why are we teaching people Bell LaPadula and like the Wilson model and all these? Well, if there's an I in it, it turns out that that model supports integrity. Like, it's just dumb. And a lot of this stuff actually comes from like academia. You have a bunch of professors that get around and like, we're going to create a mathematical model and a formula for computer security that's going to solve it. Those people don't know what they're doing. They're well-intentioned, very bright idiots. We're going to be talking specifically about what are the things that matter on the ground and what we're actually going to do with this thing. Since we all want to hate on YouTube, maybe, right? Not going to be talking about data loss prevention. I'm not. Why? Because data loss prevention doesn't work, right? And by the way, Bell LaPadula or Bell LaPadula, however you want to pronounce it, it doesn't really matter. I don't think the person's alive anymore. But Bell LaPadula is actually one of the fundamental reasons why there's so many security vulnerabilities that exist today. And one of the reasons why there's so many security vulnerabilities that exist because of Bell LaPadula or Bell LaPadula is because it's built with the inherent assumption that data itself is not dangerous. And data itself can be written into the high security context, whereas in the low security context, it is isolated. However, if you're looking at a number of different vulnerabilities like cross-site scripting, cross-site request forgery, and even some variants of SQL injection, and with the advent of AI and prompt injection, data now can become dangerous, therefore completely invalidating the Bell-LaPadula model. Sorry. Sometimes it just happens. Every once in a while, someone reaches up into my back and grabs the tickle me Elmo string on my back, pulls it, and I drop into Sans instructor mode. I'm really sorry about that, you guys. I apologize. If that happens again, Megan, feel free to slap me. Just take off your camera and slap, and
Will
I
do.
will I'll come back. I'm going to get better. I'm getting better on this, right? I'm going to get better on this. All right, let's keep going. So, like I said, at Black Hills Information Security, we do 650, thank you, Jesse, 650 plus assessments per year. We do a lot. And this isn't academic for us. This isn't something like we just teach for a living and don't actually do computer security. No, 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 no. We're on the ground and we're doing it. And we started tracking for all the different vulnerabilities what would have actually stopped us, cross referenced every single one of these core vulnerabilities into what would have shut down that specific attack. And it took a little bit of unlearning, right? We had to seriously look at what was happening in the environments that we were breaking into. And there were some assumptions like data loss prevention. We had some people at BHIS who were like, holy crap, that never was a factor ever under any circumstances. Golly gee, that's weird. And we're also going to be tying this to MITRE because everything needs to be tied to the MITRE attack technique matrix by law, apparently, in computer security. But when we're tying it to MITRE, we're not going to be going through and setting up like this is this specific MITRE technique. Well, like an example, let's go to MITRE really quick. Throw that over there. And we're going to go MITRE. Go. Sponsored. The acidification of the internet is real. All right. So we're not going to be going through the MITRE attack technique matrix and hitting every single one of these, right? Because you can pick almost any one of these, right? And you can find out like what is what is the technique that would actually stop this? So like scheduled task jobs, right? Turns out application allow listing and a good EDR would shut down this technique just fine, right? Valid accounts, like if we can go through and test and do password controls, this would actually shut that down as well. And we're going to do password cracking and password spraying labs on that bits job. Application allow listing, again, we'll shut this down because it'll stop the attacker from getting initial initial code execution access on that system. So we're going to be looking at it, password controls, multi-factor authentication, right? How do we actually implement that as well? So with the number of the different techniques that we're going to be covering in this course, we're going to be looking at them through that lens of the MITRE attack technique matrix because we're not going to be taking out individual techniques, but instead we're going to be focusing on how can we actually take out entire classes of techniques. For example, if I look over here, we go back, we go over to the command and control right here, these data exfiltration, command and control. Turns out egress traffic analysis works really well to shut down all of these if you know how to properly set that up. Or if you're looking at egress traffic, if you're trying to do application or internet allow listing, it'll shut down a lot of these techniques as well because we want to tie it to MITRE. That is definitely important, but we're not going to go through each of the individual techniques to do so. So, want to talk a little bit about compliance and the critical controls. There's way too many different frameworks out there. There's kind of an XKCD comic that I think is really, really funny where they're like, wow, there's too many standards. What we need to do is create a new standard that becomes an all-encompassing standard that covers all of the different edge cases. And then it's like, well, now there's 48 competing standards. I can't remember the exact XKCD comic. Someone's going to put it in Discord here in a second, but that's true. And that happens with compliance frameworks, and it happens all the time with compliance frameworks. There we go. It was 14 competing standards, and now there's 15 out there as well. So when we're looking at this in computer security, every single group, once again, getting a bunch of academics together, and I'm kind of ripping on academics because they deserve it. But whenever you're looking at it, a lot of people, they try to pull in really smart people that teach computer security at a university, but they don't actually do computer security on a day-to-day basis. So you end up with all of these different standards, right? So NIST has their standards, right? And then you have CIS, which I'm going to talk about here in just a couple of seconds. But then you have ISO standards, you have NERC standards. Everybody comes up with their different standards. And there's a tremendous amount of overlap across all of these different standards. And that creates even more confusion. And then NIST comes up with their different frameworks that they have. You have the reasonableness implementation for CIS. There's this constant effort to make it easier, but it tends to make it harder. Also, a lot of the standards, whenever they're written, they get out of date very, very, very quickly, and the standards tend not to be updated very quickly. My favorite example of this would be the NIST Green Book. The original NIST Green Book was fantastic. It was came out in like 1985, and it said that passwords should be 8 characters long. Should be 8 characters long. Okay, that makes sense in 1985. However, that standard kept getting picked up again and again and again and again by other standards. In fact, up until about a year and a half ago, PCI's minimum password length, I think, was 7 characters, which was horrible. It's one less than 8, which is actually catastrophically bad. And they had their reasons for it. It had a lot to do with the legacy compatibility of different systems like old rack F, top secret, AS400 style systems, and the password complexity, especially for old Solaris Spark 7 and 8 systems, which had very, very weak password controls on them. But that standard stayed in play until about a year and a half ago. And that's ridiculous. In fact, Teen Vogue, I loved this. Like Teen Vogue, this is one of those things whenever I'm talking to people in the industry. Teen Vogue had this article where they went through, oh, somebody actually did a YouTube video on it. That's funny. But Teen Vogue went through and they were talking about a lot of security and what makes a good password. And right here, oh, that's not it. Huh. Maybe this is a list of a whole bunch of other websites for people. That's good. But Teen Vogue had a really good list and they had some amazing things. You're more likely to get hacked if you're a young person. This is a good article, right? And when they talked about their password safety standards were better than NIST and they were better than PCI. And I love the fact that I can go into a meeting when someone starts complaining and they're like, well, we're looking at password complexities at the NSA and we're looking at brute forcing of those passwords. And I'm like, look, dude, Teen Vogue is way ahead of you. How about we adopt the Teen Vogue standard? If we can adopt the Teen Vogue standard, I think that will be good. Yeah, I thought that NIST increased it though, other human. I think that they raised it, I want to say to like 12 or 13 characters. Um, I think that they did. I'm not sure. I remember reading something about a new standard. It's entirely possible that they may have came out with 8 characters and then we ripped on them very, very, very hard on a webcast and had people go to the NIST feedback form and tell them it was a bad idea and then they increased it. That's possible. I'm not sure if that's what exactly happened because I don't know what happens behind closed doors anymore. I'm not invited to these parties. So we have these things where we meet the minimum, we do these frameworks, and then we're just stuck with really, really incredibly crappy passwords that are kind of institutionalized, right? So that's an example, right? But that example actually persists across almost every different type of security standard. So CIS, who we're working very closely with, this is like we have the official CIS training class for computer security from the Center of Internet Security, which is pretty cool. But one of my favorite things that CIS has is the controls navigator. And the controls navigator takes each of the different controls, whether we're talking about implementation group 1, 2, or 3, or we're talking about the individual controls, and then they cross map those individual controls to the specific controls that matter to your organization. So if you're looking at this particular control, I can't remember which one I took a screenshot of, but it says this particular CIS control maps to the what is it? AICPA, Cloud Security Alliance, Cyber Risk Institute, Digital Operational Resilience Act, HIPAA, ISO standards, New York State Department of Financial Services standards, our Australian Signals Directorate, criminal justice. It maps that automatically to every single one of those standards. And that is powerful because this means for you as a security professional trying to understand security, especially when you're in a nexus group. Let's say you're working in healthcare, but you're working in healthcare in an educational institution, and you're working in healthcare in an educational institution that's an education that's research and education, and it's doing healthcare. You may have a number of different frameworks. Now you're sharing data with foreign educational institutions. And oh my God, here's all the frameworks that are now applicable to you. So you can start implementing your controls to the Center for Internet Security, which has already done the cross mapping to all the different frameworks, which saves you a tremendous amount of time and effort to implement. I talk about this because a lot of people, when they start with security, they try to start with security by working within a framework. Like they'll work with NIST or they'll work with a New Zealand information security model, Brian, or they'll work with any of these different frameworks and they try to work with it in like the NIST 8. Can't remember how many pages it is, but it's a lot. Can't remember how many pages it is. Do I have to register to get the thing? I don't think I need to. Here we go. Ooh, takes a while to load. So this is the NIST 853. And if you were going to try to get started in computer security, you have 492 pages that you would have to go through. I'm not going to lie, chat. That's a lot. That is crazy, right? So trying to start here can be very, very, very difficult to get it set up. Uh-oh. No one is running production studio. What just happened here, folks? Megan, Ryan?
I'm here. I don't know. Where
Yeah.
did Ryan go? Ryan
Daryl?
might have died. Daryl.
I'm
I
here.
do.
It's working for me. My network lagged for a second, but it's back here. I can see
Okay.
everything. You're good.
It wants me to open production studio. I don't want to do that because that seems like a bad idea.
Don't click it. It's a
Don't
trap.
click that link. All right. So, all right. So we're live. We seem to be going okay, but thanks for letting me know immediately. I greatly appreciate it. But look at this. Like this is crazy. And this is good stuff in the 853, but it's just too much, right? And it's far too technically detailed for people to actually implement this appropriately. Yes, I have been in the room with the people that have developed these standards and DoD standards, and no, none of them have actually done computer security ever. Like they just haven't. Like in here, they'll talk about memory, free memory, object reuse, and that crap hasn't been relevant since the TSIC Orange Book series, right? But if you want to do this, do it as a Rosetta Stone. Start with CIS, cross map over to everything else. Or better yet, start with this class. Start with these 10 things, and then that'll buy you some breathing room, and that'll allow you to kind of move laterally to start implementing the other things that you should in computer security as well. So as I mentioned, the critical controls is part of this course, but we're not going to be addressing individual controls. We're going to be addressing how we can take care of multiple categories or an entire category. Like if we're looking at code execution, I think I am dead now.
I still have you
Yep.
on Zoom.
Getting weird things. All right. Just a little nervous. Thank you. Thank you. But we're going to be talking about how we can deal with entire categories with a couple of different implementations in your environment that become incredibly effective and cross map to other things. So we don't want to go through each one of these. However, that being said, we do have a lab we're going to be using Atomic Red Team. And Atomic Red Team is a framework created by Red Canary that is a fantastic framework that allows you to automatically test for a large number of these different controls automatically, which is, I think, really flipping cool for you to be able to do that as well. All right, so we're going to start at the beginning. The reason why we're starting with application allow listing is honestly, application allow listing is one of those things that'll shut down a tremendous number of initial access techniques coming in your environment. But let's talk about it just a little bit. What would, like if I said, hey guys, we're going to get some application allow listing on at this party. What are some of your concerns that you would have with that? Anyone? Anyone? Bueller? Bueller? Definitely think we have a little bit of like user friction, right? Block needed sites. Remember, we're not talking internet allow listing, talking application allow listing, but it's the same concept, right? The operational complexity of it. Yeah, you have these people that whenever they try to implement application allow listing, they try to implement it where they evaluate each and every one of the applications that you would have, right? Every one of them, right? So imagine running Word or Office. They're like, well, are we going to allow Microsoft Office? Today, we're going to have that conversation. They have a whole bunch of people that get together, start chamber, and then they say, yes, verily, Office is allowed. Here, goes through. Are we going to allow Slack? All right. There's, against and pro, against. Well, I think Slack shouldn't be allowed because it's an uncontrolled app that allows you to bypass all of the different content filtering controls. People can bring in porn, they can run malware. It becomes a direct superhighway into our environment where we cannot monitor it. And then it's pro. Well, our developers use Slack and we live on Slack and we have all these Slack apps. And they get into these huge arguments about which application should be allowed. Turns out, that's not the way to do application allow listing. That's the way to try to do perfect application allow listing. And perfect is absolutely the enemy of the good. Actually, perfect is the enemy of getting any work done whatsoever. We're not going to try to shoot for perfect. We're going to back up a little bit and we're going to try to find a way that we can get it running with very low friction with the user base. So why do traditional deny lists fail? Now, your traditional deny list would be like old school antivirus, right? Where they go through and they scan and they say this application is malware, all those different things. And it's really a psychological thing that works. Actually, it works really, really, really well for many people psychologically. It doesn't work in the real world at all. I want to make that completely clear. It doesn't work. All right, so why does it not work? Because I use this analogy and I use this story on a regular basis. I want you to imagine that there's two cavemen. By the way, it had to be dudes. I'm just going to say it had to be dudes. No, this isn't going to go in some kind of weird Andrew Tate spiral. It'll make sense in a couple of seconds, but it had to be dudes. We had these two cavemen walking down the path. Their names, let's say, were Ugg and Thug, right? So Ugg and Thug are walking, and Ugg says to Thug, hey, Thug, eat that mushroom. And Thug is like, dude, I'm not eating that mushroom. And Ugg is like, come on, eat the mushroom. Thug's like, I don't want to eat the mushroom. I'm not going to eat the mushroom. And Ugg says, I double dog dare you to eat the mushroom. At this point, Thug knows it's on, like Donkey Kong, which is also his uncle. So it's on like Donkey Kong. He has to do something, and he's got the double dog dare. The double dog dare is down, so he eats the mushroom. And he dies horribly, like really bad. Like he's got foam coming out of his ears, blood coming out of his eyes, bleeding from his rectum. It's bad. It's really bad. I've already given away too much, but it's worse than how I actually described it. It's one of the absolute worst ways to die is eating that specific mushroom. And Ugg goes back to the village, and the rest of the village sings the song of Thug the idiot. They say, Thug the idiot, he ate this mushroom. The mushroom was green and it had these purple spots. And we don't eat the mushrooms that are green with the purple spots because you'll bleed out of your butt and die. It it slaps an original caveman, by the way. The translation doesn't work, doesn't do it justice. But that's how society learned how to not eat that specific mushroom, because the vast majority of human experience was predicated and built upon creating deny lists. Don't eat that mushroom. Don't eat that fish. Don't eat that part of that fish. Don't snuggle with polar bears. They will maul you. I know they look cuddly, but don't. But we created these monster deny lists of what we were and were not supposed to do, and it worked. Turns out it works really, really, really well for general life. And the reason why is you don't see evolution in mushrooms accelerate almost instantaneously, right? Like it's not like the mushroom is a mushroom today and then tomorrow it's a filet mignon. Doesn't work that way. However, in computer security, it does. So you have your caveman brain, a cave person brain, that's constantly trying to get your head around deny lists for everything. And you have the actual reality of the threat actors that are out there that are constantly evolving their attack tactics and their techniques in order to be more effective in trying to get you to eat the mushroom, or in this situation, click the link. So deny lists don't work. Traditional AV doesn't work. Deny listing the internet does not work. In fact, many of the AI algorithms that we use today, they're pretty cool, but a lot of them are built on really large deny lists. Why? Because deny lists are still somewhat effective. They're a good fundamental basis. So a lot of vendors out there like Cisco and Fortinet and all these Palo Altos that are out there, they're creating monster deny lists of bad domains, bad IP addresses, and bad URLs because that resonates with human beings. And it somewhat works, but you need to have smarter things on top of it. So when you're looking at time to compromise, right? If we're trying to break into an environment, what exactly are we dealing with in trying to get initial code execution? A lot of our initial code execution will show up in, let's say, the temporary internet folder, right? Or it'll be at the desktop, or possibly it'll show up in the downloads folder of a user, right? Turns out if you can stop that type of code execution, like not allowing things to execute in a user's desktop and downloads and temporary internet folders, you've kind of shut down a lot of initial access attack vectors for a workstation. Now, this same concept also applies in the cloud. There's a number of different plugins for browsers. There's a lot of different third-party add-ons for mobile devices, a number of different things, but that same concept applies of we need to be looking at allow listing. Let's talk mobile for a second and cloud for a second. Phones, right? Like this is my hotspot. There are many like it, but this one is mine. So a number of years ago, Black Hills Information Security thought we were hacked. It was a bad day. It was a bad, dark, dark, dark day. We had one of our project managers, not like from running she had no access to actual pen test proposals, but she was doing time management, like CRM project management. We noticed that her account was accessing and sending a tremendous amount of data to a third-party service online. And when we tracked back what the app was, the app had this really long, weird name. And we were like, we're screwed. We're in trouble. So we started researching what that IP address was, who owned that IP address, what domain it was associated with. And then we started reversing like what the app was, because the app name that was showing up in, I think we were still on Google at that particular point, had a really random like screwball name. And it turns out that it was a company called TripIt. Yeah, TripIt. So if we go, just go to TripIt, right? TripIt. I don't know if anybody's ever used TripIt, but TripIt is a travel website. Okay. So whenever you install TripIt, it can do bookings for you. It can also automatically correlate your inbox with your calendar for any like trips that you have coming up. But when you install TripIt in this little thing right here, the TripIt app wants access to your email, all of your email, wants access to your calendar, wants access to your chats. It wants access to all of these different things. So she wasn't hacked. She just installed a travel app. That's all she did. So that concept of application allow listing can also still apply here in the world of the cloud, in the world of mobile apps as well. Because when you're trying to deal with traditional deny listing, almost any technique that you can think of will work for getting initial code execution on a system. So as I said, this has been a bad idea for a long time. In fact, this is a great little graphic that Marcus Random came up with a number of years ago. Marcus Random was the original, kind of the first person to tie together what we consider to be a firewall today. Very, very cool security researcher. A lot of fun to hang out with. Haven't seen him in a while. But he had this great graph that he unscientifically threw together. And he was talking about hostile apps and legitimate apps. So he was talking about this all the way back in 1999, talking about how what's legitimate versus illegitimate and evil on the internet is very, very much outgrowing what the legitimate things are that people do. And this is before the big advent of ads that were out there as well. So this has been a problem since, this has been for a quarter century now. We've been trying to deal with all of these different problems that originate from application allow listing. I want to give you some examples, right? So some techniques to get around that traditional deny listing or AV, one of them is my favorite, ghostwriting. A lot of testers don't do this as it involves assembly, but some do, and it works sometimes, right? Trying to bypass antivirus engines is very much kind of a, I don't know, it's more of an art form than it is a dedicated step-by-step, like you can follow this guide to bypass AV. It's not how at all how any of this works, right? It's all art. So the concept of ghostwriting is you create an executable, you convert it into a .asm file, which is the assembly file. Then you edit the assembly, the raw assembly, and then you convert it back into an executable. And this original technique, as far as I know, what came out from Royce Davis of Pen Test Geek a long time ago. So here's the setup. First thing you do is you link the libraries. Turns out in Metasploit, there's some great modules that are there for disassembling executables, right? No disassemble. Is that a short circuit reference? YOLO sec? Wow, that's very good. No disassemble. No disassemble. Shit, where's shit? Me no see shit. That's all I really remember, other than it being awesome. All right, so we create the disassembly libraries, we pull them in. We get our IP address because we're going to need that. And then we create our payload. Now, this is old, right? This has been around a long time. We use MSF payload. Today, we would use MSF Venom is what we would use. We do Windows Interpreter reverse TCP. We set the L host, we put the port, and we kick out the raw binary. The raw edited, like straight dope binary, right? Then we use the disassemble utility in Ruby, like that from Metasploit. It's a Ruby script that allows us to do disassembly. And we get this stuff here. That looks scary, doesn't it? I mean, that's like straight computer code. I can't remember. Oh, number 5. Number 5 is alive. He could read that. He could absolutely read that, right? So he would read this assembly and he could tell you all the different things of what it's doing, and that's great, and that's fine, and that's wonderful, and it's good. But there's one thing in here that is really interesting, right? Do you see these XOR EDX to EDX or XOR EDI to EDI? Does anybody know what happens when you XOR a register? By the way, register is an area of memory that the CPU can access with little to no penalty, which means it's really freaking fast memory. It's the fastest memory it's actually on your CPU chip. Those are register values. Yep. So when you're looking at this, right, we got this XOR EDX to EDX. Yeah, you're doing binary math, but specifically what type of math? Let me go here. That's different. Let's go new. Make it bigger. here we go. All right, so we're going to teach everyone how to do XORing, and we're going to do it in the next 45 seconds. All right, here's the deal. If the top line and the bottom line equal each other, it's a 0. If the top line and the bottom line do not equal each other, it's a 1. All right, simple, elegant, works. So this would be 0, 0, 0, 1, 1, 0, 1, 1. Does that make sense to everybody? If the top and bottom line match, it's a 0. If it doesn't match, it's a 1. So what this means is this does not equal 0. And because it's not equal to 0, it means that the two things are different. Does that make sense? It's doing comparisons. So if you want to do a comparison, let's say a password. I enter my password, a supercalifragilisticexpialidocious, even though the sound of it is somewhat quite atrocious, exclamation point 1. And I put that password in and it compares it. It's going to do a bitwise comparison to what is the password and what it should be and what I typed in. And if they match, it would be 0 because the bits would match. If I put in supercalifragilisticexpialidocious, even though the sound of it is somewhat quite atrocious, I screwed up, it would not be 0. Therefore, I know that those two things didn't match. Make sense? All right. So now if we're doing XORing, right? If we're doing straight XORing and we're XORing a register value from itself to itself, what is it always going to be? Every single time. Every time. 0. We're clearing the register. So that means you can do anything you want to that register at all. You can add 1, subtract 1, push, pop, pull, whatever. You just do whatever you want to that register and put it right in front of this function. And at the end, everything is erased. So you're adding in a whole bunch of different garbage that at the end of that computer function is going to be wiped away. So here you can see we got push, pop, push, pop, push, pop. One of the fun things that my testers do when they do this is they see how many pushes and pops they can put in, and you can slowly start watching AV engines lose the plot. Kind of neat. Finalize the payload, execute it, you're good to go. Another way that you can get around AV engines, LOL bins. Now, what's interesting, and by the way, this stands for living off the land binaries, right? And one of the interesting things about living off the land binaries is the application allow listing technique that I'm going to talk about. You'll run into people that'll say, well, you can get around that if you can just execute something in the Windows directory. And you're right, but it does shut down that initial code execution. And that's what we're trying to shut down. We're trying to kill that initial code execution on the system. But there's a ton of binaries. Like you can use run DLL, you can use certutil. There's all kinds of different executables that you can run on a Windows computer system that allow you to execute malware of your choosing. And honestly, they're right. You can, but we still have to get that initial code execution. So we're going to go through and we're going to talk about that initial code execution and how to get around that that bypass technique by stopping the attacker from getting that initial code execution on it as well. So the point is, like, what works changes. It's this very variable thing. We have like 5 people at BHIS that wake up every morning and their whole purpose in life is, how do I bypass antivirus engines? That's it. That's all that they do. And that's a cool gig, right? But they constantly have to be playing artistically to a number of different weird things in their head. One of the great things, the author of Brute Retell, he's constantly coming up with BOFs that allow you to bypass antivirus engines in a variety of different ways. And we're creating new ones all the time as well. There's also another company called Outflank by Fortra, I think is the name of the company, that they come up with a bunch of bypass techniques as well. And if you're on their like Slack servers, you have all the best pen testing firms in the world talking to each other constantly on how to do bypasses, and they get rolled into these products. So there's constantly teams working together to come up with these bypass techniques out there. There's other ways, AV bypass through encoding and obfuscation, right? Metasploit has a module that's built into MSF Venom that allows you to do encoding on the fly. And encoding was specifically created originally to create or to bypass bad characters like EFFF00. Those would be terminator strings. Like if you came across an FF, it's like that's the end of the string, you're done. 00, that's the end of the string, you're done. And if you had that in your malware, like if you're looking at the hexadecimal of it, it would stop executing anything after that. So you would go through and encode your executable to get around using those bad characters with alternative bad characters that are out there as well. By the way, FF is not a terminator string. That's a broadcast address on a network, which we'll talk about here later as well. There's also tools that automate a lot of this. One of our good friends, Hacking Dave at ATT&CK, has a tool that he's created and they maintain called Magic Unicorn. Magic Unicorn takes a lot of the most heavily used techniques today, and it automatically does the bypass techniques for you and kicks them out. So lots of tools, commercial and open source, and different techniques that are out there to get around AV engines that are out there as well. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about how we can shut that down. And at a base level, we're going to talk about application allow listing as it relates to directories. We're going to start here because you have to start somewhere. You have to start sometime. What better place than here? What better time than now? Because all hell can't stop us now. God, such a good song. All right. So when you allow list, you can allow list by individual files. You can also allow list by manufacturer digital code signing certificates, which we're going to talk about after the lab here in just a couple of minutes. But the easiest way to do this is allow list by directories. So if you're looking at the directories that are in use in many of the different computers that are out there, let's say Windows specifically. With Windows computer systems, most of your programs are going to execute from the program files x86, and the Windows directory. That's where they're going to execute from. And that kind of, when you juxtapose that with where does initial code execution happen for a lot of malware, not all, but a lot of malware, it'll actually execute in the temporary internet folders, downloads, and desktop. See, what we can do is say, these are the only directories where code is allowed to execute from. That shuts down things like downloads, that shuts down desktop, that shuts down temporary internet folders, so people can't execute code from them. And by the way, if you need to execute code from those places, we're going to talk about that here in a couple of moments on how you can actually set that up and allow that as well. This is an example of hash allow listing, where you go through and you allow list every executable on a system. Every executable on a system. If you're setting up the lab timer, Daryl, you want to set it to 45 minutes and then hold. Because we're going to have the lab, we're going to have the allow listing lab. It's going to be a long one, 45 minutes. Yep, we're going to get it at the top of the hour. So just giving you guys a heads up. Got a lab coming. So this allows you to automatically allow list every single executable that currently exists on this computer. And that is helpful if you're working in like a Citrix or a VDI environment. That's neat. Not very applicable if you're trying to run this in a standard environment that people have access to their desktops as well. You can also do allow listing by certs and the digital certificates and the publisher verification. This is another thing that I'm going to show here in a little bit. It's got a little slider where you can be like, the publisher is Google, it's allowed to execute. The publisher is Oracle, it's allowed to execute, and so on. So we can do that where we can create a little bit of leeway so it's not just a hash. We can say anything from this vendor is allowed to execute, or we can say anything from this vendor for this specific application to this specific version and this specific code signing certificate is allowed to execute. We can adjust that code signing like level of severity based on the level of security for the systems that we're working on. And AppLocker allows us to do this. It allows us to do this by path, hash, certificate, vendor. Super easy to push out via group policy. And if you do it right, it actually makes it very, very, very secure for an attacker, or very secure against an attacker trying to get that initial code execution. Because once again, is the attacker going to get that initial code execution right in the Windows directory and the program files directory? It's possible. It is. but it's going to shut down a number of the different spray and pray style attacks that the attacker would put as far as a macro, or they would try to put in like an ISO or a number of different ways to get you to download some type of binary and run it, because those directories do not exist on that as well. Question from YOLOSEC, but that code signing system, code signing isn't super accurate. There's a way to get an unapproved version of PowerShell through the Windows Store. It looks like somebody has taken my class. Yes, there are ways where you're using the Microsoft Store, like some versions of PowerShell and Python are automatically, but those are specifically unhooked by AMSI. That's different. Okay, that's different. But if you set that up, it would allow you to download and execute that in the appropriate directory where it would be allowed to execute. So once again, there are bypass techniques. So we're not trying to come up with something that's 100% accurate. We're trying to come up with something that's going to get us into that high 90s, right? Because most of the crap that you're going to hit in your environment is going to be coming from those drive-by download attempts. Also, when we're talking about the Microsoft Store, remember, the attacker has to get initial code execution to execute from the Microsoft Store. This is a chicken and egg dilemma, right? Sure, you can download things from the Microsoft Store and execute them, but how did you execute what you're going to download from the Microsoft Store? You see how that becomes a problem? We're trying to shut down that initial prime mover for the rest of the malware and how it actually exists. So AppLocker, you have it set up where you're in the local security policy. You delve into application control policies, go to AppLocker, you configure the rule enforcement, you create the default rules. Don't automatically generate rules. This will hash every single one of the programs that already exist on your system. And by the way, repeating this, Amish, we're going to have a lab with step-by-step instructions on how to do this in just a couple of moments. So we got the default rules. Those are the ones we're going to create. And what these rules do is they say everyone can execute any and all files in the program directory. Everyone can execute any and all files associated with the Windows directory. And the administrator can execute anything. This is your backup pressure release valve. Something goes wrong, we're in an emergency, break glass at that particular point. Then you turn on the application identity service and we're ready to go. So here we go, folks. First lab of the day. Let's get to it. I'm going to go into MetaCTF. If you're looking for the instructions on how to get to this, we actually have the instructions in resources. Let me open that up real quick. We have... Here we go. Let me open this up. Here we go. So there's a link to this doc. And this doc tells you to get logged in, create an account, go to Cloud Labs, which I did right here, right? And then it says, enter your activation code. Your activation code is right here, DECE4XWX7. You just copy that and paste that right in, all right? All of it is set up and it's ready to go. Now, when you do this, you get 16 hours of lab time. 16 hours of lab time. All right. Now that gets you more than enough time to get through this course, but you have to remember to shut down your VMs, which I'm going to talk about here in just a couple of seconds. So you do view manage lab, and then you click the button start lab. I'm going to do that now. I'm going to follow the instructions because that's who I am. I'm a follower. I'm going to click start lab. Now it's going to send the request and it's going to start two separate virtual machines. Okay. It's going to start a Kali and a Windows. Do not try to start them individually. You want to start them with the button up here, start all machines out there. Otherwise you'll get like, can't connect to my Kali VM. That's because you didn't follow the instructions. I hate to be blunt, but it's what happened. So a lot of people will come down here and try to start one or the other, start all machines, just as this little call out right here, says start lab. You want to click that button in the instructions. All right, once we're in, it's going to take about 2 minutes for it to fire up the virtual machines. This gives me ample opportunity to talk to you all about destroying your lab. If you are done with the lab and everything worked, you can hit stop all machines or destroy lab. A destroy lab reverts the systems back to their original state. That tends to be what I do between labs. So I start pristine every single time. All right. Then sometimes if I'm working on something and I want to pause, like I'm going to go eat, I will select stop all machines. And that's the equivalent of pausing the virtual machines. When you come back and hit start, they come back. All right. So in a couple of seconds, we'll be able to log in. Now, all of the labs are here. All of the labs are here in the in this GitHub repository for all of my classes. Well, not all of my classes, but at any rate, we have a number of classes that we have here, right? So the one that we're doing is Intro to Security, and we're starting with AppLocker. Okay, we're starting with AppLocker. And when you go to AppLocker, it has step-by-step instructions on how to make this lab work. For example, we start PowerShell. We disable AV. Once again, yes, and thank you, Brian. I know that they're open to the public. I have students all the time that freak out. They're like, anybody can get to these. It's like, it's fine. I'm not sitting around being like, this is my intellectual property and I'm going to keep everyone from getting to my sweet, precious labs. They're out here. I mean, hell, if you want to steal them, you want to put them in your class, I honestly do not care. I may make fun of you, but I honestly do not care. Let's go out and train people. That's go forth, do great things, right? So we're going to disable AV, which once again, the goal of this lab isn't to show you like AV is wonderful, or we're not trying to bypass AV. We're trying to show you how to implement application control policies on the system, right? Then you're going to shut off your firewall, which is pretty normal. That's what Active Directory join systems do all the time out there. All right. Then you're going to create a user. Okay. Not a user. You're going to create a password for the user administrator. All right, chat. This is important. All right. When you do this, if you refresh your virtual machine, it breaks. And the reason why is the password that is automatically set up is different for Guacamole. So let me show you what this looks like when it breaks. I'm going to connect in. So right now there's a random password or complex password that allows me to log in via Guacamole. And I'm going to go through this opening step so I can show you what this looks like. So it takes a couple of seconds. If you get this, just click yes. We trust everything on this network because it's all good. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to show you what it looks like when it breaks. I'm going to copy this. I'm going to open up a PowerShell prompt. Takes a few moments. All right. All right. I just changed my administrator password. Everything works. Everything works just fine. Everything works great, as a matter of fact. I can go through the rest of the lab. I can shut off my firewall. I know I'm going backwards. I can disable the real-time monitoring on the system, right? Do that, right? Everything's working just fine, okay? Everything works. But watch what happens if I refresh. If I refresh, it tries to resend the administrator password to log in via Guacamole, and we get this. It broke. And the reason it broke is because I refreshed it. If you get this problem with the refresh, just go back here, destroy the lab, and then restart it, and everything goes back. So everything will work as long as you don't refresh that tab. If you get that error, just destroy and restart. Everything comes back just fine. But in this lab, you're going to get your IP address for your Windows system. You're going to open up a Kali terminal. Once again, I'm going to go over here and I'm going to start the lab. I'm not going to start Kali. I'm not going to start Windows. I'm going to start the lab that just restarts all of them. And then in your Kali instance, you're going to become root. You're going to mount a share where you're going to put in your Windows IP address here to mount a share. Then you're going to get your Linux IP address. You're going to create your malware. You're going to run MSF console. You're going to use the multi-handler. By the way, I'm going through this quickly, chat, because I am going to go through it slowly after we get done with the lab. Then you're going to exploit your system and you're going to run your malware. So there we go. We've got the problem statement. We can execute malware. Now we're going to stop that from happening. You're going to open up local security policy. You're going to go to AppLocker. You're going to configure the rule enforcement and create default rules. Do not automatically generate rules. We're going to create default rules. Then we're going to make sure that they're configured and they're enforced. It should be like this, but just make sure that it is. Then we're going to go to services. We're going to start the application identity service. And then we're going to use GP update and we're going to force the group policy update on the system. Then you're going to CD into the intro labs, and then you're going to run as user whitelist netcat, and you're going to put in the password of ADHD, and you're going to get an error. It's going to pop up and say, you cannot run this. This program is blocked by policy. All right. So that is the lab. Super easy to set up AppLocker. This lab is going to take us 45 minutes with the break, right? So we have a 10-minute break now. Then we are going to do basically 35 minutes for the lab. And then at quarter till 45 minutes from now, I'm going to go through the lab slowly with everybody. Now, while we're doing this, we're going to be rocking out some jams from Bo Bullock or Daft Hack. So with that, let's get going. If you all need anything, please do not hesitate to ask. That is what we're here for. We also have the customer support. If you look at tech support, we have a full tech support group ready to go and help you guys out as well. So let's get rolling. If you need anything, go over to tech support. And once again, if you get that angry red, blow away your lab CTF instance, destroy it, restart it, everything will come back just fine. All right, let's go through this. All right, so we're going to get started. I'm going to open up PowerShell prompt like so. There we go. And we're going to disable antivirus like so. There we go. Once again, the goal of this lab isn't to like, so here's how we bypass AV. That would be a dumb lab. And I've done that before. And it doesn't work because it works at the beginning of the lab. For some reason, people start throwing signatures up at their AV vendors. Who knew? All right. Next, I'm going to set the firewall to disabled because we're remotely logging into the system. This one's actually interesting because most systems in an Active Directory environment, as soon as they get into the Active Directory environment, they actually disable their firewalls. It's weird. Most enterprise level Windows computer systems are more secure in a coffee shop than they are in their own Active Directory environment. Now we're playing with fire here. I'm going to change the administrator password to password 1234. I'm going to open up a Kali terminal and do my best not to refresh my system. All right. So I'm going to accept the Kali warning. There we go. I'm going to move that over there. Get my IP address over here. People are I got minion memes popping up. There we go. So I've got my IP address for my Windows system there. I'm going to make this a little bit bigger so you guys can see it a little bit better. Let's go to appearance, font. No, thinking 16 and bold. There we go. That's it. Yeah, bold. Everything was aquamarine, aquamarine. All right, next I'm going to become RIT, like so. There we go. I'm going to get my IP address. There we go. And now I'm going to mount my Windows share with a password of 1234. And we're just going to get some malware on that system. No big whoop, just some malware. We put in that IP address here. What is it? It is 10.10.238.156. Mount that share. Mount that share. Do 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 do. Then I'm going to CD into said share. like so. Then I've already got my IP address. We should be good with that. And then I'm going to run MSF Venom. We're going to create some malware. Going to create a virus here, people, because that's what we do. Changing lives one virus at a time. There we go. And my Linux IP address is 10.10.231.95. There we go. Creating that malware. We're naming it a good name, a nice name. Trust me. Trust me. So what we're doing here is we're creating malware that's written for x86 CPU processors on a Windows platform. So it's going to be using a template that's AB, Apache Bench.exe. The payload from the Metasploit framework is Windows Meterpreter Reverse TCP. Lhost is my Linux IP address. The port is going to be 4444. Output format is going to be an executable. And then we're going to put it on the output is mount Windows share trustme.exe is what we've got going on here for our malware that we're creating. Next, I'm going to run MSF console. We're going to give it a Q for quiet. I am sleeping in here. All right. So the reason why I use the Q is because the banner, I don't want it to display the banner because some of the banners freak people out. Like there's a banner that says kernel panic. People are like, oh, it broke. I got a kernel panic. And it didn't actually cause a kernel panic. That's a goofy joke from HD Moore, but it freaks people out. So I just quiet down the banner rather than trying to explain a whole bunch of banners to people. So it takes a few moments for it to start. Metasploit is a big program. Lots of stuff going on with Metasploit as well. There we go. What is silent on scans? I don't know what that means. Give me a little bit more context. So we're going to do exploit multi-handler. All right. So the multi-handler, that means we're creating an exploit. Multi means multiple different operating systems at the same time. And the handler means it's just a handler. It's basically a like kind of a dummy exploit that is going to allow us to generate a payload and have that payload execute on that as well. Oh, what is silent quiet on scans? I don't know what that means. I don't know what silent quiet, like I don't understand the context. So sorry. When you get it, just let me know. The next one, if you notice, the payload here matches the payload here. Windows Meterpreter Reverse TCP. Up here, we created the malware, called it trustme.exe. And then down here, you have the payload so it can catch it. So this is the handler. Oh, there's the question. I think you're confusing silent versus stealth. Stealth scan is a SYN only scan, and that's where we're sending SYN packets. Oddly enough, we're doing a SYN and then a FIN. The only thing you're missing is the SYN ACK, but that is a stealth scan, not a silent scan. So, okay. All right, so we're creating and making sure the multi-handler matches the payload up above for catching that reverse connection. I'm going to set the lhost to be my Linux IP address. I don't know. Oops, let's go down here. 10.10.231.95, like that. So make sure that that's the right IP address, 10.10.231.95. Give me a screenshot, Amish. Give me a screenshot of the tool because different tools call things differently. All right, so we've got the lhost is going to be our Linux IP address. We're going to type exploit and nothing happens. Absolutely nothing happens. The reason why is because we did not start the malware. All right. So I'm going to open up a command prompt. There we go. And I'm going to cd to the top level directory and I'm going to run trustme.exe, which is my malware. There we go. And over here, we have malware that has been executed on this system. Meterpreter is bad news, y'all, right? That's a full backdoor executing on the system. I can dump password hashes off of this system. It's a bad day for these people in defense land. We've got malware on this as well. All right. So, all righty, here we go. So now what we're going to do is no, you can share screenshots. If you have a tool that you're running, if you're just taking a screenshot, like a little carve out, you can get that. But, or text, give me the text. Doesn't matter. All right. So now I'm going to start my, we've got to go through and start our security policy. So let me get too far ahead of myself, right? So we're going to run the local security policy. So let's go ahead and type that in. LOCAL security policy. Going to run that. There we go. And then we're going to go down to application control policies and AppLocker, like so. Wait for it. AppLocker. There we go. Nice. So now once we're in here, we're going to go through and we can see configure rule enforcement, and it should be configured and enforce rules, which is weird because it's not. I know that that seems weird, but we haven't actually pushed this policy yet. Windows is strange. So I'm going to generate the default rules for executable rules, Windows installer rules, is already there, script rules and packaged app rules, they're already there. So we're good. We've got the rules created. And then we have this right here. We have the configured rule enforcement. Everything's ready to rock, end or roll. And now we're going to run GP update to basically force the group policy update on this system. Now, here's the deal that's kind of interesting about this is I'm an administrator and I can run anything I want. Because remember, if we go back to our AppLocker rules, if I go to executable rules, anybody who is a built-in administrator can execute any program on any file. So what happens if a user that's not an administrator tries to run a program on this particular computer system, right? So let's go ahead and let's start the application identity service. Let's go to services because I screwed up. I didn't start the services, got ahead of myself. Go to application identity, start that one. Click Oakley Dokley, and I'm going to go ahead and rerun my group policy update again. There we are. And then what we're going to do is we are going to CD into the intro labs, and we're going to see what happens when we try to run malware as a non-administrative user. So if I CD into intro labs like so, then we run as user whitelist, the command NC, and we put in the password of ADHD, which is a correct password. We get this little error. It says this program is blocked by group policy. For more information, contact your systems administrator, right? So what we're looking at with this is what happens whenever somebody tries to run a program that is not in the appropriate directory, right? But if we were to, let's say, let's just go open up this and let's go ahead and just copy that file over. So let's not take trust me. Let's do the intro labs one like so. And then I'm just going to take netcat. I'm going to copy it. And what we're going to do is we're going to paste it into the Windows directory. And now if I CD into Windows and I run the same thing, it allows it to run, right? So it allows it to run because it's in that specific directory that is a globally allowed directory. And once again, if an attacker wanted to like get access to my computer, they would have to somehow get past the fact that I cannot execute from the desktop. I cannot execute from temporary internet files. I cannot execute from downloads. I cannot execute from the standard places that a normal user would actually execute from. All right. So what this means is we've taken off like 90% of the drive-by downloads. Now, let's talk about how an attacker bypasses this. If you actually have an exploit, like if we go into the let's go to program files here. If there's an exploit for the Elastic Agent, FileZilla, Git, Java, NCAP, NPCAP, any of these different programs, then it would still allow that malware to execute. You still absolutely have to, without question, you have to put in the effort to make sure that your applications are patched and up to date. Because if there's an exploit that's running around crazy on the interwebs that's hitting 7-zip, which by the way, I think there was it WinRAR or 7-zip a couple of weeks ago? There was a 0-click exploit that was out there, it would still allow it to execute. And the reason why is because of something called permissions inheritance. If I trust 7-zip, anything that executes in this directory is going to execute because it's in the trusted directory. But once again, the vast majority of the exploits that hit exploits actually come from the desktop, documents, downloads, and temporary internet files. That's where we see most of them out there as well. All right. So yes, you still have to patch, you still have to do vulnerability management, you still have to do all of those things because you're still going to have exploits. Okay. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to destroy my lab, right? I changed the password. I'm destroying the lab and we're going to move on. And here in a bit, I will restart up the lab again. Probably see me flit back and forth because we're going to get into some password spraying and password cracking on that as well. All right. So we got some fun stuff. Password controls. So the first one that we're going to jump into, and this is going to get us right into another lab here in just 2 shakes of a lamb's tail, is password spraying, right? So if you're looking at password spraying, it's like most people, when they look at a password attack, they think I'm trying to brute force a password of a user, right? Like say somebody's trying to hack the Strand.js account on a server, right? They would come up with a list of 4,000 different passwords, and then they would try to brute force that account. And this actually does work pretty well. There's a really good TV series. I don't know if anyone's seen it. Of course, some of you have seen it, but Mr. Robot was a great series. I didn't finish watching the first season because one of my favorite characters was shot in the last season in the first episode unceremoniously. It was kind of yeah, it was kind of weird. But the beginning of Mr. Robot in the first season, he's constantly habitually breaking into people's personal Facebook, personal email, personal different things that are out there. And he's constantly trying to break in, right, to these people. And he does it. And he comes across one person where he can't figure out what their password actually is. And he's very shocked about it. But when we're trying to break into an organization, it's different than trying to break into an individual's account. It is very, very different than trying to break into an individual's account. We're not trying to gain access to an account. We're trying to gain access to any account out there at all, right? So I use this instead. We start with a password that is more than likely going to be used by somebody in that organization. One of our favorite ones, season and year, right? Spring 2023, I got to update the slide. You know, we're in summer 2025, woohoo, right? But that's most likely a password we're going to see because people have to change their password once every 90 days. What changes roughly every 90 days? The seasons, right? It's like summer, spring, winter, and fall. It just changes, right? So we have people that have to update their password, but they want to remember their password. So this allows them to remember it. It's like, crap, what's my password? Look, it's snowing and it's 2025. It's winter 2025. Or a company name, 1234, a company name, whatever. There's a number of different passwords. But if you're going after a large enough organization, someone's going to be using some variation of those particular passwords. So what we do is we try to spray those passwords because I'm not trying to get into someone's account. I'm trying to get access to anyone's account. And then it allows us to do that on a mass basis. Now, what's really cool about this is, believe it or not, it's harder to break into smaller companies than it is a larger company. If you look at smaller companies of like, let's say 500 users or 200 users, the odds of us actually getting a password spray are pretty low. We have to try for an extended period of time. However, if we're looking at a very large company, let's say, 100,000, yeah, someone in that organization is going to use some variant of this password. For example, some people would say, wait, my large corporation doesn't allow dictionary words. Good for you. They're still using the same password. They're not going to type in spring 2023. They're going to do spring with a dollar sign for an S, a one for an I, and so on. So they'll still do variations on that theme and we'll still be able to gain access to those environments as well. Yeah, 100,000 employees. There's a lot of companies that are that size. Honestly, any company over about 1,500, we can almost always password spray successfully if they don't have multi-factor authentication set up. So if we're looking on this, right, it's about an hour. If they don't have MFA, 10,000 users, a simple season and year passwords going to get in. Also, it's really hard to detect, very hard to detect. And the reason why is it looks like a valid authentication to the system. Now, one of the things that people kind of get into at this particular point is, well, wait a minute, wait a minute, wait a minute, wait a minute. Wouldn't Microsoft or Google shut you down as soon as they saw that password spray coming in? Checkmate, hacker. Nope, they wouldn't. And the reason why is whenever we're running these different attacks, we will leverage cloud providers' services to be able to relay through like IP gateways through a vendor to another cloud vendor, right? So we'll use things like CredKing and FireProx, which will stand up in Amazon. We have versions that we use in like Azure and in Google, where our entire password spray will go against Microsoft through Google, or it'll go through, like then I'm like say Amazon going to Google or to Microsoft, right? We'll use cloud vendors to attack other cloud vendors. And the reason why is because most cloud vendors will not shut down other cloud vendors' IP addresses from coming into their environment. And the reason why is all of these different services are used by multiple different companies. So you'll have a company that'll be using S3, or they'll be using AMIs in Amazon, or they'll be using VDIs in Microsoft, or they'll be using various microservices in Google, and they'll be using all of them in conjunction with other cloud vendor services. So if they were to go through and block Google's services and their IP addresses, it would actually block legitimate services as well. And they can't do that. So that's why we bounce these things through. So this is what a password spray actually looks like, right? This is a tool that you're going to get familiar with here in just a couple of seconds called Domain Password Spray. In the one that you're using, we got a modified version that Bo created called Local Password Spray. Works the same way, but it takes a valid list of users and then it attempts to log in to every single one of those user accounts with a simple password. This one was just summer 2016, right? And it was hitting an external exchange interface and we got access to the environment. In fact, you can see we got access to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different accounts by this. Because once again, I'm not trying to gain access to an account. I'm trying to gain access to any account. Once we get in, then we can start doing lateral movement. And lateral movement would be used by things like Graph Runner, which is our main tool that we use post-exploitation that allows us to do all kinds of wicked cool stuff against an environment. Once I gain access to an account, I can actually use Microsoft's Graph API. I can search and export email, search and export SharePoint OneDrive files, search all Teams chats, deploy malicious apps, discover misconfigured mailboxes, clone security groups. It slices, it dices, it does everything that you want in the password spray Popeel-O-Matic, right? So check out Graph Runner. Once we get in, Then we can start spreading. So now we've got some problems, right? How are we going to deal with this? If we know the attack methodology, how do we actually deal with this problem directly against our organization? It goes back to our NIST Green Book. This is one of those areas that I need to have a conversation with the people at CIS, because the people at CIS reduced the overall complexity standards because they enforced two-factor authentication. Nay, don't do that, right? Just because we bring in a security control doesn't mean that we can remove or reduce a previous security control. So this is very, very common, where organizations will be like, well, we've turned on two-factor and our passwords were 15 characters. Well, let's turn on two-factor authentication and let's turn our passwords to 8 characters. That'll be fine. That's not a good idea. The reason why this is not a good idea is it's only a good idea if two-factor authentication is enabled everywhere. It never is. There's always going to be some application, there's going to be some portal, there's going to be some email pop that we can gain access to that does not require the multi-factor authentication part of it. Here's an example: mobile devices, right? A lot of companies use apps. And if I run the app in a desktop, it requires multi-factor authentication. If I run the app through a mobile app, it does not. We can ride on top of that. So we need to make sure it's absolutely everywhere. So as Brian was bringing up, it's like defense in depth is a thing. It's not reducing different security controls. Also, if an attacker does gain access somehow and you don't have good password complexity, then it becomes relatively easier for that attacker to spread and crack every password in the organization. So we're going from a very small breach to a very large breach very, very, very quickly. So we want to make sure that we're looking at using two-factor authentication is nice. And then we're also kicking in the multi-factor authentication as well in as many places as possible. So we talked a little bit about hidden two-factor bypass. We've got apps, Outlook Web Access, Exchange Web Services. You see a number of these different services where two-factor is not required. In fact, some services by Google and Microsoft, if you're authenticating, if they see that you're coming from an iPad or a phone, they pretty much bypass that two-factor authentication, and they'll do some other type of authentication. It'll be like, go to this other app, type in the number that you see in this other app to allow it and say that it's you. That's pretty good, right? That's, I love that. That's great. But I only see it really in Microsoft and Google. Like Google will say, go to YouTube. And as soon as you're in YouTube, enter the number that you see here. That's nice, right? But does that exist in all your SaaS apps? Probably not. So once again, you got to look at your organization. You may have it really secure in Office 365, but if it's not enabled in some third-party service, then I'm going to take advantage of that third-party service. So don't allow your users to reduce their overall complexity just because two-factor is enabled in some places. The only thing that matters when we're talking about passwords is length. The only thing. Somebody shared a helpful guide of how long it takes to crack passwords. Once you start getting into passwords that are like 15, 20, 22 characters, to brute force them, it can take till the heat death of the universe to do that. It's ridiculous. And the reason why is every character that you increase your password length by doubles the total key space. What the hell? How does that work? If you have an 8-character password and then you move to a 9-character password, that means to crack it, I would have to crack every 8-character password and every 9-character password variation. If I go to 10 characters, I still have to crack the 8, and now I have to crack the 9, and I have to crack the 10. All right, so let's talk a little bit about quantum, because damn, that gets interesting really quickly. Thank you very much, Brian. Brian just shared out a helpful little chart, which is super cool. I usually didn't talk about quantum computing because quantum computing is quite a ways off. And let me clarify. Let's first talk about what quantum computing is and why it's applicable to password complexity. All right. So a long time ago, they did a double slit experiment where they were sending light or radioactive like particles through two slits in like iron. And then on the other side, they were capturing where those particles actually hit. And what they discovered is that there was particles that were hitting way outside of the realm of possibility. In short, there was no direct line where those particles should have hit whatsoever under any circumstances. That was the point where they realized that a particle is both a wave and a particle at the same time. Mind blown. Going a little bit deeper, it is actually kind of neither. We just talk about it in terms of waves and particles because that's something that we can actually understand. Instead, whenever you're looking at electrons and where they actually exist, and protons and where they actually exist, the better way to look at it is a probability matrix. The probability of waveform collapse, as far as where something is going to exist, only exists when it's observed, right? Sorry, folks. Once again, Albert Einstein hated this crap up until the day he died. He called it spooky action at a distance. Pretty wild stuff. But when we're looking at how this actually relates to computing, with quantum computing, whenever you're looking at like a 1 or a 0, if you're looking at a transistor, it either is a thing or it isn't a thing. And whenever you're looking at a qubit, it can be both, neither. It's actually indeterminate, right? So what happens is whenever you're trying to calculate something using a quantum computer, using qubits, you actually can process all the possible variations of what something could be. So imagine a password. A password and brute forcing it is a non-probabilistic hard problem where you have to try every possible combination until you hit the combination that matches. So what you can do with quantum computing is not do that thing. Not do that thing I just said, which is try everything until you hit it. With quantum computing, you run a quantum computer like a D wave and you reach into basically the infinite number of possibilities without observing it, and then you pull out the hit that matches without observing it. How in the living hell do you actually do that? I'm glad you guys asked. There's a number of different ways that you can do error correction with quantum computers. One of the ways that you can do it is run another quantum process where you take your quantum output without observing it, feed it through another quantum computer without necessarily observing it, and it reduces the errors that are encountered with quantum computing. So again, what the hell does this have to do with anything? Couple of quick points. First and foremost, quantum computing is really, really good at these types of non-probabilistic hard problems. It really is. And the reason why is you're dealing with very large numbers, like things like factoring primes, weird stuff like that. But the problem with quantum computing is it is not a general purpose computer system. Like, you're not going to be running Doom on a D wave. They are very specifically kind of coded applications. So yes, it is possible that somebody could come up with a quantum computer that reaches into the wave of infinite possibilities and plucks out different password hash computations that are out there. Once again, proving why multi-factor authentication is so incredibly important, right? So we want to make sure that the passwords are long, right? All right. All right, two-factor is something you know and something you have, right? Many times it is token-based, SMS-based, it is app-based. All of these are better than no 2FA. Every once in a while, you're going to have people that'll be like, SMS two-factor authentication is bad and no one should use it. Those people are not your friends. Don't party with those people. Because if you're dealing with an aunt or an uncle or a cousin or a grandpa or a grandma or a mom or a dad, two-factor authentication is infinitely better than no two-factor authentication, even if it is SMS-based two-factor authentication. The level of threat profile that I deal with for my employees and I deal with my family members is wildly different because I am worried at Black Hills Information Security with nation state level adversaries. We disable SMS based authentication because an attacker could, most likely would, go through the effort of attempting to completely do SIM cloning. Will they clone my phone number and get that two-factor authentication when it hits my phone? That's a real threat model. It's not necessarily a threat model for my aunt, my uncle, grandparents, people like that. All right. This is one of the problems that we have with computer security, right? When you look at computer security, people are like, well, I can hack it. That can be bypassed. You can do that. And they're constantly fighting for absolute perfection. Perfection does not exist. We're playing around the edges. We're playing around with margins. If we can increase security 98% by enabling two-factor authentication, then for everything that's holy in the universe, do that thing. If you're worried about attackers gaining access to a quantum computer, you may want to start developing security posture that is resilient against quantum computing. That is absolutely something nation states are doing right freaking now. However, if you're a small dentist shop or a small manufacturing company, I'm just going to go out on a limb, just say maybe the NSA and the Russians and the Chinese won't waste the resources on a quantum computer to break into your organization. Why? Because there's some jackass in your company that has a password of password 1234. That's faster, more efficient, and to be honest, a lot easier than trying to use a quantum computer. Service accounts. These are one of those areas where you generally don't have two-factor authentication. You can't have two-factor authentication. Going back to my premise, right? Two-factor authentication, if you're going to reduce password complexity, only works if it's enabled absolutely everywhere. One of the places where you don't see it is service accounts, because the service account isn't going to do two-factor, right? Also, a lot of these different accounts, they don't have account lockout as a thing. They need passwords that can stay up and run for an extended period of time, and they are often ignored by security teams. And the reason why those security teams are overlooking service accounts is because crap breaks. In my intro to pen testing class, by the way, I'm teaching intro to pen testing at Wild West Hacking Fest. If you want to take it virtually, you can. It's literally like everything about running and being a good pen tester. I teach in 2 days. Check it out. Somebody can get a link for it. Wild West Hacking Fest. You guys should show. It's good. But many security testing teams ignore service accounts because they tend to crash environments whenever they do a password spread. Oftentimes, when something is not tested, it is ignored, and then you have bad security practices. Like developers, no, it's going to come virtual. I can come right to your house, Roswell. It'll be like all of our classes so far, except they'll be in my barn. It'll be a little bit different, I guess. There you go. All right. So because it's overlooked, because it's ignored, it becomes a great gateway for people to break into organizations, and it's beloved by attackers everywhere. Kerber roasting is an example of how this crap works. This is terrifying, but true. In Active Directory, you use Kerberos authentication. And the way Kerberos authentication works is you authenticate to the domain controller. And once you've authenticated yourself with a valid user ID and password via Kerberos pre-authentication, at that particular point, you're granted a ticket, a magic ticket, like Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, not a golden ticket. You can give that out to service accounts. Believe me, that's a thing. Whole nother conversation. But you get a ticket. And everywhere you go to a workstation, you go to a server, you go to a file share, you go, you give it your ticket, it sends that ticket to the domain controller. The domain controller looks at it and goes, yes, Sonny, this ticket is valid for the Active Directory train. He's allowed to go. Then you can keep going to things. That's cool, right? I mean, that seems like a good idea. It's neat. Not resetting your password again and again and again. That's awesome. However, in many environments, service accounts, if you can get a hold of the TGT or the ticket granting ticket, this big, huge glob of crap right here, inside of that is the literal password hash for the service. And any valid user account can ask for that ticket granting ticket. Yeah. So if you're not testing the password complexity for your service accounts, somebody will. And this is just one of those ways that you can gain access to somebody's account. Once you're in, then you get a service account. And it's not like service accounts don't have ridiculously high permissions to things like sensitive databases, web apps, and different API gateways where all of your sensitive data is. Yeah. All right. Other things, LLM&R, link local multicast name resolution, MDNS, and NetBIOS name services. These are services where you can trick systems to authenticate to you and steal their password hash. This is it. This is all you have to do. Responder PY, give it an interface, ETH0, done. That's it. And then all the systems on that network that have LLM&R, MDNS, NetBIOS name services, and yet WPAD will come to you. And then you intercept their password hashes. How do you get their password hashes? You get their password hashes because this tool starts up a web server, encrypted web server, WPAD server, SMB server, Kerberos server, SQL server, IMAP, POP3, SMTP, DNS. And all of these are basically like authenticate to me. Thank you. And you're good to go. Other tools, like I said, for bouncing these types of things off would be like Cred King, right? Cred King allows us to do AWS Lambda for IP rotation. So if you're trying to block me from coming at your environment, good luck, because I'm rotating through Amazon AWS. Bypassing two-factor authentication. There's tools like EvilJinx or EvilGenX or wherever people pronounce it these days. This tool is a person or a man in the middle proxy tool where I can get you to authenticate to me, and then it'll proxy that authentication to this server. And once it proxies that authentication to the server, it'll intercept the two-factor authentication and get a valid token for that two-factor authentication. Pretty terrifying stuff. Now, some things you can implement in your environment would be things like password managers. These are a good idea. And I know people crap on LastPass, but it's better. Well, maybe it's not better than having LastPass. I don't know. But you have one login, you have secret server, you have tons of password managers that are out there. Find one and use it in your organization. And then also do me a favor, make sure you've enabled two-factor authentication on your password manager. It doesn't do you a lot of good to have a password manager with no two-factor authentication if your password is LOL1234. Like, they're just going to nail you. And you're going to look really bad when that happens. You're going to be a little embarrassed when that occurs. You're going to be just a scooch embarrassed as well on that as well. Thoughts on those book password managers? Some of the older folks, I actually have no problem with people writing their passwords down in a book somewhere that they keep on their person, right? What about LOL pass 1234? You see people do it. I don't know. I don't see a lot of hackers jumping up to try to steal people's books. It's just one of those weird things, but it look, it's a compromise. I would prefer people didn't write their passwords down, but you have some older people that are just going to do it, and it's okay. Tape under your keyboard, that's secure. No attacker is ever going to check under your keyboard and be like, yep, there it is. What was the password? It was password 1234, right? Privileged identity management. These are cool tools. What these tools do is they will randomize the passwords, especially sensitive passwords, like service passwords, not service, but like administrative passwords. They will randomize the passwords. So you have to check out access to gain access to those services, and then it'll randomize them again. So if you're looking at like BeyondTrust, CyberArk, Centrify, Laps from Microsoft, it'll randomize the sensitive passwords in your organization. And if anybody wants to manage that particular service, they have to check it out. Now, this works great as long as they don't have any vulnerabilities that people exploit to gain access to. I don't know if you all remember, but there was a BeyondTrust. I think it was BeyondTrust. Was it BeyondTrust? It wasn't Beyonce. I know that. I think it was Department of Treasury. Yeah, right here. Cyber attack targeting BeyondTrust remote support SaaS platform led to the compromise of critical infrastructure API keys, allowing unauthorized access to 17 customers' SaaS instances. Yep, was Department of Treasury. I remember, I remember these things sometimes. So there you go. So it works as long as somebody doesn't gain access to your BeyondTrust instance once again. All right, so we have two passwords. We're going to do back to back, folks. two password labs, price of one. The first one is password cracking. The second one is password spraying. Let's go ahead and let's jump into that real quick. So I've got my VMs started. I'm going to start my VMs now because that's a crack-a-lackin' good idea. Get it? Crack? Never mind. It's a bad joke. Going back to the lab list. And the first one we're going to do is password cracking. Then as soon as you're done, you're going to move to password spraying. So password cracking, you're going to disable your antivirus again. You're going to become root. On your Kali instance, you're going to start Kali, become root. You're going to remove the pot file. That's where Hashcat saves previously cracked passwords. Just a good idea to delete that in between sessions. And then you're going to CD into opt password cracking, and then you're going to run Hashcat against an MD5 password list. MD5 passwords are often used for things like web servers. Then you're going to go and look at the next one, which is a sam.txt file right here. And sam.txt would be security accounts manager. That's what Windows uses for its passwords. And you're going to crack some Windows passwords. So there you go. So you can see those password hashes a cracking. Then when you're done with that password lab, you're going to go to password spraying. The alternative way that we gain access to environments is through password spraying. You're going to generate 200 users on your Windows system. Then you're going to open up PowerShell, going to set the execution policy to unrestricted. You're going to import the module local password spray.ps1, and then you're going to attempt to log into a bunch of systems with a password of winter 2020, or a bunch of user accounts. You're going to break into 6 user accounts. Then you're going to delete them. All right, so this lab takes us about 30 minutes and then a 10-minute lab. So we got 40 minutes on the clock. I will resume at 10 minutes after. So 30 minutes, that's 2 labs, 15 minutes each, 10-minute break. We're back in 40. So with that, get rolling, or as we like to say, get cracking. Let's go ahead and let's do some password cracking and password spraying. All right, so we're going to first kick out the password cracking side of the house. Now, with the password cracking, one of the things I want to spend a few moments talking about is kind of the idea of GPUs and how GPUs actually work, because understanding how a graphical processing unit works is really going to help you understand why something like Hashcat works so well. So if we go back, let's go back in time. Let's go to, am I still sharing my screen? Yes. Okay, we're good. Let's go to, all right. So this is like one of my all-time favorite video games. It's MechWarrior 1. This was kind of a revolutionary video game because it was the first video game that had kind of three-dimensional polygon like type stuff. It was pretty mind-blowing, and I absolutely loved the whole universe with like MechWarrior and everything that they did. Now, what's interesting is if you go and play this game in an abandonware, it still is, as a matter of fact. Warrior 5 Mercenaries and Clans, amazing games. Go play those. They're great. So with this game, the faster the CPU that you got, the faster the game played. And this particular game had no built-in like speed limiter, which meant the faster your CPU, the faster the game played. And there was no ceiling. It just kept going. So if you play this on modern computer systems, it just screams fast, like crazy, crazy, crazy fast. Like the little guys are running all over the place and it's supposed to be slower. Um, so when you start looking at these video games, we kind of got to the point where we saw the same thing in MechWarrior 2, and that was kind of becoming the absolute limit of what you could do with kind of working with Pentium-based CPU. All right. And the reason why is your CPU is constantly rendering the environment, it's rendering the polygons, it's rendering all these. It's also rendering the game mechanics, and it's rendering all the math and everything that goes underneath the game. So that becomes a bottleneck. You can only shove so much data through a fast CPU. Now, to be fair, CPUs have gotten faster and faster and faster and faster over time, but you kind of hit a limit. So what happened between MechWarrior and like something like Crisis, right? So if you look at Crisis and this particular game, is it just that CPUs got faster? No, actually, believe it or not. Whenever you're looking at something like Crisis or a modern video game that has really crazy environmental effects and things of that nature, you enter the world of graphical processing units. All right. So the way that they did this and the way that they got to the level of resolution and fidelity that you see in modern video games is they basically realized instead of having one really, 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 really powerful CPU, what if we had a card that had multiple GPUs on it, right? So if we look at an NVIDIA GPU breakdown, an NVIDIA GPU has a crap ton of little CPUs built into it. Okay. So instead of one CPU doing all of the different graphics processing, you have multiple GPUs working in conjunction with each other, and they're doing something specifically called floating point arithmetic. Floating point arithmetic. And an example of that would be I want to calculate rays of light going through trees. I want to calculate how the wind is blowing through grass or hair or something like that. I'm doing one function and I'm doing it again and again and again and again and again and again. And I can brute force that function and make it look like a real picture outdoors. Like if we're looking at any video game for resolution, like it's not Crisis these days, what Cyberpunk, right? If we're looking at like Cyberpunk, this is one of those games that's just absolutely gorgeous, right? It's just so beautiful, you want to lick it, right? So what they're doing is they're taking these different functions and they're distributing these functions across multiple different smaller CPUs that exist on a video card. Is everyone with me so far? I want to make sure everyone already just kind of understands that, right? We're all good. Good chat. All right, everything looks good. So turns out the same thing that you do for a video game with a card that has multiple different graphical processing units in that video card and rendering that over multiple different CPUs, it works for two other things really well. But three other things. All right. So when you're looking at this being used not in video games, it's being used in crypto mining, right? Because the same thing happens when you're doing crypto mining as when you're playing video game. You're taking these floating point arithmetic algorithms and you're doing them in massive brute force parallel. And you can distribute that across multiple different GPUs. So if you're looking at an NVIDIA A100, this thing is packed to the gills with GPUs. And if you notice, the A100 doesn't even have an HDMI port on it. It's just closed off, right? The other thing that it does really well, because you're doing lots and lots and lots of processing in massive parallelism, is AI, right? Artificial intelligence, where we're trying to take these massive, massive learning models and we're trying to come up with answers that people put in, like, why does my cat's butt smell so bad? You know, we got to have the best GPUs in the world to answer those questions, don't we? But it also applies to password cracking. You see, when we're trying to crack passwords and we're trying to go through and we're trying to identify, what is the password for a specific user, we get a password hash. And let me show you. Oh, let's go to shadow. Wrong one. We want to look at a password hash right here. So if I go up to the top, you're going to see this right here. Right there is a password hash, right? So we have Kali. This is the hashing algorithm that's being used. This is the salt associated with this password hash right here. And then this is the base64 encoded representation of that password hash going through 10,000 rounds of encryption, moving the salt to the front, to the back, front to the back, front to the back, front to the back, front to the back, until you get to the last one, then you base64 encode it. So what you do when you brute force that is you start with a whole bunch of passwords like Apple, and you do the exact same mathematical function with the exact same salt. And then banana and summer 2025. And you do that again and again and again and again and again. And instead of doing that on a single CPU, you do it across a GPU that has thousands of little CPU cores to break that workload up across all of those different passwords. All right. So now what we're going to do is we're going to actually do a little bit of password cracking, right? So we're going to become root. Then I'm going to delete the pot file. Just a good idea to do that. There we go. And then I'm going to CD into the password cracking directory that has my handy dandy password hashes that we're trying to crack. And we're going to talk about some password hashes. Let's do this. Let's do MD5. There we go. All right, so these are MD5 hashes. They're actually just straight MD5 hashes. MD5 is just a hashing algorithm that does hashing algorithm things with hashing algorithm people. And this is a hashing algorithm that we see used in a lot of databases that are used by WordPress type websites or PHP based websites. So if I was doing a pen test or if I was a hacker, I would gain access to these password hashes, and then my goal would be to crack those password hashes. So what we can do is we can use Hashcat, which takes advantages of graphical processing units to be able to try to brute force those passwords parallel. So I'm going to go ahead and put in this right here. So running single crack mode. We're going in, we're specifying what is the algorithm, which is MD5. And then we're giving it a rule list, which is lead speak substitutions. We're cracking the password MD5.txt, and we're using a password dictionary of password.list. And off it goes to the races to try to crack those MD5 passwords. Now, these particular passwords are actually passwords that are in the password.list. Just a quick little inside baseball thing. Whenever you're trying to create password hashes for cracking in a class like this, I can either create a password that cracks instantly, or I can create a password that takes till the heat death of the universe to crack, or sometimes a dramatic pause of 3 hours. It's very, very difficult to come up with a password that cracks in like 10 minutes, like a really cool, dramatic pause. So I opted to go with passwords that just crack really, really, really fast. So if we're looking at this, you can see that the password, the first one is peanuts, second one is tiger, swordfish, thrasher, love 123, and cross country. All right. So there we go. So that's cracking MD5 password hashes. Now on a Windows computer system, we have sam.txt, which is the security accounts manager. This is giving us the user. Right here, I've got ADHD. I've got the administrator, which is a renamed guest account. We got the RID of the account. This is the landman password hash right here. I actually know the password is blank because it starts with AAD B3, B4, 35, B5, 1, 4, 0, and then it starts over again. And then this is the actual password hash. This is the NT password hash, which is actually an MD4 hash of the password. So what we can do is we can change that M variable where it was 0 with MD5, and we can change that to M1000. And now we're telling Hashcat to crack NT password hashes. So it'll take a couple of seconds. There we go. It got freedom. It got blank. It got 8675309. Password Fender Rabbit 1. There we go. All right. Question is, can we get a recording of this? Absolutely. It'll be in the resources Discord. So when you come into Discord tomorrow, if you go into resources, there will be a recording of this class. So there you go. Now there's a lot more to this. If you look up Hashcat cheat sheet, we actually have one at BHIS, which is a full cheat sheet. Let me share this with you in the link that gives you all the different options of what you can do with Hashcat. There's a lot you can do with Hashcat, so it's pretty cool. All right, so that is the first lab. Now, getting the password hashes is very much in line with, how do I put this? I've already broken into the computer system, right? I've already hacked that computer system. I've already broken into that computer system, and I'm generally cracking password hashes from the purposes of trying to further my access to other parts of the network. So I always tell people, when you're pen testing, you break into an environment, get access to a system, dump the passwords, crack the passwords, use the passwords, repeat. You do that again and again and again. Hack, dump, crack, repeat. Hack, dump, crack, repeat. If you do that, if you're in the cloud, if you do it for authentication and spear phishing, once you get access to any system for that initial access, you need to dump the passwords, crack the passwords, use the passwords. All right. So let's talk about how we gain access to something if I don't have a password on that system. And that brings us to the next lab, password spraying. Password spraying is a fundamentally different critter from password cracking. Password spraying is where you are trying a single password against multiple user accounts. And the reason why you're doing that against multiple user accounts is because you're trying to stay away from the password lockout for the failed logout or failed authentication. In many environments, if I fail to log in 4, 5, 10 times, it's going to lock my account out. And then I need an administrator to unlock that account for me. The password spray gets underneath that as an attack vector. So what we do is we try a password that is most likely going to be used, and we can try it in a variety of different ways. We can try it on the outside of the environment. We can also try it post exploitation, gain access and do a password spray inside of the environment as well. All right, so let's go through and I'll show you what this actually looks like. And then I'm going to share a YouTube video. And then we get into Ask Me Anything. We close out all of our sessions with an Ask Me Anything, where you all can ask me any questions you want. All right, it's fun. All right, we're going to run the 200 user gen.bat script, which I completely screwed up. I need to open up command prompt. Hold on. There we go. Going to generate 200 users, so it looks a little bit more realistic on that. I've already got PowerShell open over here. There we go. And then I'm going to set the execution policy to be unrestricted, like so. Go ahead and do yes to all, because what the hell? YOLO. Then we're going to import local password spray libraries. And then we're going to run it. In this situation, I'm just going to use password of winter 2020. And there we got 6 additional user accounts. Now we can log in as any one of those user accounts. There you go. All right. So this is different, right? This is getting us access. So you may want to look at watching a video. Let me give you a video 0 to hero attack tactics. There we go. There's a YouTube video of what it's like to go from the outside of an environment into the inside of the environment, gaining access to an environment by doing external password spray, and then doing an internal password spray, and then using things like NTLM Relay X to get credentials with link local multicast name resolution out there as well. Alrighty. So that kind of concludes what we wanted to cover today. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and we're instead going to switch into an Ask Me Anything where you literally do just that. So, what questions do you have for me? I know that we covered a lot of territory in this class today, and we're going to cover a lot more over the next 3 days. We found this particular model of doing half days works a lot better for people than doing like, an 8 hour day of just, crushing you with all of this stuff. But by the way, I do have an 8 hour day coming up on Wednesday. On Wednesday, I start teaching. I've got some stuff for the EU. I start teaching at 4 o'clock in the morning. I get done at 8. I take 2 hours off, and then I start teaching you all at 10 Mountain until 2 my time. So Wednesday is going to be a long day. So, all right. So, what questions do you all have for me? So, oops, boy, I just kind of took off. Do you think let me go over to this one where it doesn't blow off. So so I took my name from something you said in the spring. Do I have validation in keeping it? YOLO. Yeah, absolutely. YOLO security is just, let's just give it a shot, see what happens. Let's go ahead and run that hot rodded scanner against a dialysis network in a hospital. YOLO. It should be good. Should be good. Thank you so much for joining. Yeah, I don't have any low sodium V8 here, Brian, which is a problem for me. I'm trying not to drink much coffee and I don't have any low sodium V8. So yeah,
Need to Instacart stat.
Instacart, right? I don't know if they have that in Bozeman.
Really?
Bozeman's such a big town. I wouldn't be at all surprised if they did.
Gosh, we have that in
Like they
my
have
tiny
department
little
stores
town.
here that you do not have unless it's like a huge city, but it's like downtown Bozeman.
Yeah.
I had some questions. What training would you recommend for someone after taking this MST Teach trying to get better at security? I like the cyber deception class, but honestly, I would listen to your heart. If the offensive stuff speaks to you, try to take like an offensive class. If the defensive stuff speaks to you, look at the Antisyphon catalog. Or Megan, why decide, right? Just take them all. We actually have our Black Friday link that is up all the time. If we still have it, it's
Yep.
basically
Ryan got it.
the entire on-demand catalog for $1,500 a year. So that's pretty cool. PNPT, OSCP, CPTS. I don't know. Too many certs out there. That's why we're creating a new cert. Ours is going to be different. Sit tight. It's coming. I have a friend who's starting as an intern with BHIS and he loves it so far. I'm not a student. I was wondering if BHIS is anything like an apprenticeship program. We do for SkillBridge in the military and specifically for internships with college students. It's kind of hard to get into it. But yes, we do have a program, and if you know them, you can talk to them about how to get into that as well. What do you recommend for using Kali on Windows 11 machine? I recommend using Windows subsystem for Linux 2, Judy. You can install from a VM. You absolutely can, but it's super easy to install Kali from WSL. So there is our Black Friday sale, which we just keep that sale rolling. We're actually coming up with a different subscription model. We're coming up with a model that is the red team bundle, the blue team bundle, which is something like $49 a month or something like that. Or you can get the whole the crumble bundle. We're trying to come up with names. It's not the humble bundle.
No,
I don't know what we'll call it.
it's
It's
not the
called the
kit and
Bumble bundle.
caboodle bundle.
We can have the abominable snowman. That's one humble bumble once I pulled his teeth. I don't know. But we're going to be coming up with these probably in the next week or two. So you'll be able to subscribe and get everything. So you don't have to eat $1,000 all in one gulp. Because I know that that's hard for some people. I don't like subscriptions. Megan, we've talked about this.
Yes.
Not a huge fan of subscriptions, but there is a ton of people that the idea of just putting $1,500 on a credit card is not possible.
Yeah, absolutely.
$49 is something that they can do.
One free thing we have coming up is the summit. So I'll put a link in there for that as
I
well.
forgot about that.
Yeah, the blue team summit's coming up. So That's just talks and stuff. We have post summit training too, but the summit itself is free.
Yep. Check it out. We got a bunch of classes coming out there. How can I volunteer for Mile High Wild West Hacking Fest? Do we have a
It's
volunteer?
not up yet, but it will be posted on the conference page. There'll be a call for volunteers. It's not up yet. We're
Yep,
hoping within the next week or so.
it'll be coming. What framework should an aspiring vulnerability researcher focus on? Ooh, that's a good question. I recommend anything cloud right now. I know there's a lot of people that are really into AI and things like that, but I still think there's so much, like uncharted green fields and research of vulnerabilities in the cloud space. So question was, any thoughts on how to sell the unconventional security approach to C-level that educates themselves? Here's what you do. You start doing brown bags, really like low key, protecting yourself online, protecting your family and your kids online, how to protect your home network with the Open VPN. Here's how you use browser plugins and things like that. Become the expert with the simple stuff. Don't just jump in and try to push down good security down everyone's throats. You're just an asshole. People don't like that. Trust me, I've learned from experience. It's better to kind of subtly become that trusted advocate. Like, sit down and come up with a presentation on how to protect a teenager at home. That's a tough thing. And it's something that a lot of people are working through. And if you can be that person that they trust with those things, they're going to trust you with the big security stuff as well. All right. What other questions? Good questions to start out.
Did you see the one about password spraying?
I missed that. What was the question?
It's from the password spraying stuff. Can an EDR flag it if it sees the same hash applied to different users within a time frame?
So usually whenever you're doing a password spray, you're doing it with Active Directory. And you're not just trying the same, well, that's not quite how that authentication works. One of the problems that you run into, and this is really bad with Wolf, is a lot of people use the same passwords. Like that season and year, you'll have multiple people using that exact same password. So we created a tool called the Domain Password Auditing Toolkit. This is by Carrie Roberts, DPAT. And DPAT will actually go through and look at all your password hashes and see how many people are using the same password hash. The issue is if Active Directory starts throwing a flag and shutting down when the same password hash is used, any users that like just let's say accidentally use the same password would be shut down in that as well, which is actually way more common than you think it would be as well. What kinds of things do you look for in a security analyst or SOC analyst? There's so many paths. One, taking these two classes. We're actually going to be extending the SOC. I think the SOC core skills class is going to be SOC core skills part 1 and SOC core skills part 2, and then intro to security. We have a whole bunch of labs coming down the line here shortly that are pretty crazy cool, using things like Hayabusa, doing timeline analysis, um, looking at different event IDs, looking at event logs in different ways. So yeah, we've got some working specifically with Lima Charlie as an EDR and writing signatures. So that is coming up. Let me see if I have the link. I can actually show you the lab. See if I can find it for you. I can show you what's coming.
Are you off-roading?
I am. I am. This is kind of weird. Tim, no suggestions found. That's weird. Sorry. This is what I get for off-roading. Every time. Every time.
I know. I was trying to
My
warn you
nail is
a little
breaking.
bit. It didn't work very
Like
well.
my nail is breaking. Like, how often does Outlook break? Don't answer that question.
The search feature in Outlook is fantastic, I found.
There we go. That was
You don't need to
great.
find anything.
I'm almost there. I'm almost there. Here we go. I've got the email. I clicked the email. Here we go. Got it. All right, so I'm going to share my screen again. All right, so these are some additional labs that we're kind of working through. That Tim has created. So let me go here. Let me look for the directory. Here we go. So this is what we're building on, where we're dealing with Windows event logs, sysmon logs, authentication logs, tools to learn, and then a log analysis lab. And then we got Lima Charlie, Elastic, telemetry, and I'm probably going to get rid of the Elastic labs. And then MITRE attack framework, scripting with Python. So doing PowerShell basics, detecting brute force, and some different challenges, networking and telemetry. What do we need for looking at network traffic, browser extension attacks? I don't think we have a lab for that one yet. I don't think so. This is just talking about it. But if we look at all of our labs, I don't think they got it yet. But there's tons and tons of labs, but this is what is probably going to become the SOC Core Skills Part 2 class, where we get into it's not really change, it's just going to be a whole nother class, but we're really getting into these types of detection and things like that as well. So it's coming. It's coming. Like at any rate. Let me stop sharing. Oh. So yes, there is more that is coming down the pipe. All right. DPAT, Domain Password Auditing Toolkit. Spent a lot of time on identity security and recently started looking into IR, heavy emphasis on MITRE. Any recommendations of what to looking into the gaps? I would just try to grab as many like compromise, I would start playing any forensic CTF that you can. We haven't talked about the pay what you can cert that we've created, where we created the ACE-T certification. Zach, I think, is going to show up Thursday and kind of talk about that as well. So yeah, that's a good idea. Let's kill our machines. I'm going to kill my machines right now. Thank you so much. I am killing my lab machines. They're dead. That was an excellent recommendation. So yep, we shut those down. Okay. What else do we got? That was a good recommendation. But yeah, you got to get into just kind of getting into as many CTFs as you can. Right. Destroy. All right. Any other questions out there, folks?
I
A lot of people.
I
Yeah,
put
go
the
ahead.
information in the resources channel.
Oh, on how to get
About-
set up on the AP certification?
Yeah, the ACE-T. Or actually put it in the wrong one, but I'm putting it in the right one now.
Okay, cool. Let me know when you got it in there, and then I can kind of walk people through what
Yep,
we're doing
it's in there.
a little bit. There we
Agreed.
go. Let me download it. Let me reshare my screen. Here we go. Alrighty, let me share again. There we go. So this is our ACE-T core cert. And this is basically, we're trying to create a pay what you can. We're probably going to end up raising the price. We started at $5 and it's probably going to be $25 in the near future. And we kind of apologize for that, but we're kind of getting an idea of what our costs are for it. So it looks like 25 is about the cheapest we can make it without losing money on that as well. So with this, you can go in, you can put in your $5 quick select or whatever, you put your name on your certificate. And then once you're in, you can see that the Antisyphon ACE-T core certification has shown up. And then once you're in there, you can start the multiple choice questions. You have to solve 100 multiple choice questions, and you have to be above a 70, and you have to do it in 2 hours. But that's not the only thing that we do. I don't like multiple choice certifications. In fact, I hate them. And part of the reason why we created this is because I hate multiple choice tests so much that I decided to create a multiple choice test. I know it sounds weird. But one of the reasons why we're doing it this way is we can do it so it's dirt cheap. Because a lot of the companies that are out there, they have a multiple choice test and they charge $400, $500, $800 for a certification attempt. Seriously, screw those people. But we're doing this. Yeah. All right. Anyway, so you can start a new attempt. You go in and you take that multiple choice test. And then you have a whole bunch of different CTF challenges that you have to solve. So you're going to go through and solve these anti-siphon challenges like mystery service, hiding deep within, spam to ham, hexed, dictionary dilemma, executor, wherefore art thou? One line, please. No, of course, nobody needs mail. And then you solve those challenges, and then you have to do a write-up. So you have to do a write-up of 2 of the challenges. Like you have to write how you actually solved that particular challenge, and then you upload it, and then it's complete. And then you can share a link to someone that you got AST Core certified. So this is going to become the foundational certification. And then as you want, you can level up in different areas. Like if I go over here to Meta CTF, let me go to my CTF competitions. Go to the Antisyphon cyber range. Here we go. I can go to the problems. If you come in here and you decide to start solving these problems based on these categories, binary exploitation, recon, crypto, reverse engineering, deception, web exploitation, forensics, then that builds your profile right here. And your profile isn't just like you're certified in this thing because you took this class. You can actually become certified in each of these categories as well. So this is absolutely, we're hoping kind of changes the certification game. So it isn't just such a cash grab, but more of like an assessment. And it's also affordable for people. That's really what we're trying to do. So yes, it will be coming down the pipe a little bit later. Just sit tight. We'll walk everyone through. The instructions to get started are out there. You all can do that now. All right, everybody. I've got to get ready for the news. I'm going to bail. I want to say thank you so much, and I can't wait to see you all tomorrow.
All right, everyone. Have a good night. The recording is actually now, because we're doing this in Zoom events, you'll get an email when the
No, not this one. No,
not this
these ones are still in the
Not
old
this one.
Zoom.
these are the same way. Never mind.
Yeah.
Scratch that completely. Everything's
Right.
changing all the time. But hopefully everyone has a good night, and I will answer your questions about the it looks like somebody had some questions about some of the pre-conference training. So I will answer those, and you can always send a ticket in to support at Wild West Hack and Fest and at .com, and we can answer those. So now that I was completely wrong on the recording, I guess we'll go ahead and kill it. Go ahead and kill it with fire, Daryl. Have a good night, everybody.